The people outside had no clue what had happened inside, but when they saw shadowy figures carrying out the bodies of hunters, it was obvious something terrible had gone down. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Are those all of them?" The members of the Brave Guild and staff from the Hunter Association who had reported the incident turned pale as they watched the grim scene unfold. The battle had been brutal. Jin-Woo and Hain, top hunters from the Hunters Guild and the surveillance team, were the last to emerge into the night. Reporter Kim, who had stayed all this time, watched closely as they appeared, looking rough-bloodied, clothes torn, hair messy from a fierce fight. Even though Cha still looked okay, Sung seemed like he'd been through a lot. Excited, Kim's heart raced as he snapped their photo, his hands shaking with the shot. The reason he'd become a reporter in the first place was so he could share stories just like this one. He wanted people to know that while everyone's attention was fixed on Japan, there were heroes in Korea who risked everything to fight for their country. Today alone, nearly 20 of Korea's best hunters had lost their lives, and their bravery deserved to be remembered. Imagine if this dungeon had burst apart. Can you picture how much worse things would have gotten? We're talking about a disaster on a scale that's almost impossible to imagine. These brave individuals stepped up in the biggest way possible to stop something even more terrible from happening. Without Kim here to share their incredible story, would anyone even know about the heroic things these people did? He was snooping around the association, hoping to stumble upon stories like this. Click, click. The camera captured every moment, as tears filled his eyes. He was so moved. Jinchul's legs finally gave out, and he plopped down just outside the gate. That's where Jin-Woo found him. "Hunter Sung," Jinchul muttered. He tried to stand up, but Jin-Woo gestured for him to stay seated, and nodded toward the reporter in the distance. "Is he allowed to take my picture?" Jinchul asked with a chuckle. Jin-Woo understood that taking pictures outside of work wasn't allowed, but just like during the Jeju Island raid, people were going to share what happened anyway. He worried his mom might see him in this state, and get upset, but he couldn't stop the reporter from doing their job. Still, Jin-Woo hoped someone would tell the world about how the hunters sacrificed themselves, and stopped another tragedy from happening. A soft breeze carried the sound of faraway ambulance sirens. The next morning, every newspaper had big headlines about the dungeon incident in Japan. Only one newspaper reported on the news about the double dungeon incident, and it sold more copies that day than any other paper. Jishen's 9-check-us in the US. The Hunter Command Center sent agents from Asia to Japan to check out what was happening. A helicopter flew out of the safe zone and into Tokyo's airspace. The senior agent who had volunteered for this dangerous mission looked down at the city below and shook his head. "This is terrible," he muttered. Tokyo was in even worse shape than he had imagined. The dungeon break left the city in pieces. Buildings were just blobs, cars looked like crumpled paper, and streetlights were bent in two. Fire, smoke, and ash filled where buildings used to be. It was super spooky. The agent frowned, thinking this must be what hell looks like, but he didn't come here to mourn the mess. He was there to get the job done. From up high, he filmed the destruction below. He glanced over at the Japanese representative beside him and said, "Wow, looking at all this destruction, it's tough to even spot any bodies." Thanks to his training back at the Hunter Command Center, he knew all about what had happened during that S-rank dungeon break on Jeju Island. In every video and photo, Jeju streets were filled with bodies of people who couldn't escape. It was one of history's darkest moments, so the Hunter Command Center recorded every detail. Yet, here there were no bodies to be seen. It was as if they'd vanished into thin air. In fact, there wasn't even a hint of the dead to be found. The Japanese representative explained. Of course, the giants ate everyone. It was obvious from his bloodshot eyes and unshaven face that this young man working for the Hunters Association of Japan had been through a lot lately. With a worried expression, he continued. "Imagine this. These giants are like a wrecking crew, trying to wipe away anything that shows humans were ever there. They crumble buildings, gobble up people, and even rip out the trees lined along the sidewalks." The agent nodded in agreement. "These S-rank gate giants aren't your average magic beasts. While most just want to hurt people, these giants leave a trail of destruction wherever they go." Everywhere they looked, not one building or house was still standing after the giants passed by. "But because of all that destruction, we managed to gain some extra time." One of the people from the association let out a small shaky smile. He wasn't sure if he should feel thankful or sorrowful. The reason was strange: some folks had escaped alive, because the giant's destruction was so complete. His face showed a storm of emotions, like a battle was raging inside him. The agent glanced at the man beside him, and thought, "It's incredible. He hasn't lost his mind." After all, this man's capital city had been destroyed in an instant by magic beasts. Yet somehow, the agent could understand his pain. He knew what it felt like to lose something so deeply. 8 years ago, a powerful creature named Kumish popped out of an S-rank gate and caused major destruction on the west coast of America. Around that same time, Korea had to give up its largest island to magic beasts for 4 long years. Luckily, they just got it back. The agent had watched the intense battle caught on camera. Even though he had no connection to Korea, he couldn't help but cheer when a young Korean hunter burst into action to save the day. To him, this wasn't just a fight between a small country and invading magic beasts. It felt like a heroic moment where humanity stood together against a common enemy. Here in Japan, another intense battle was raging between humans and these fierce predators. And then came the result. Chaka kaka 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 kaka. Cuff. The helicopter was making a super loud noise, but things on the ground were so bad that the agent barely even noticed it. He felt angry, frustrated, and totally helpless to do anything about the chaos below. He focused on completing his mission. While filming, he asked his Japanese partner various questions that came to mind. Suddenly, something shocked him so much, he nearly fell out of his chair. "Whoa, look at that," he exclaimed. His partner helped him back into his seat. "You saw it, didn't you? There's another giant right over there," he said, still amazed. "More like it's not moving at all," said the young Japanese man, staring out the window. The American agent wiped sweat from his face and looked too. In the middle of a wrecked part of downtown Tokyo, stood an enormous magic creature. It was way bigger than anything the agent had ever seen. "So, that's a giant." The agent turned pale, as the representative told them to fly closer. "Are you sure that's safe?" he asked nervously. He'd been told all the giants were gone, and that Tokyo was perfectly safe now. This was not what he had signed up for. The Japanese representative spoke calmly. "It's fine. As long as we stay high enough out of its reach, it's 100% safe. Trust me, we've figured this out through many scouting missions." The young Japanese man sounded so casual about it, but how many people had been lost to get this information? The agent felt a shiver race down his spine as he wondered what had happened to those who got too close. But this information was super useful, because his job was to gather intel on S-rank magic beasts, and report back about Japan's situation. His eyes widened as he stared down at the massive creature below him, taking it all in with a mix of fear and focus. The creature seemed kind of familiar, and boom, it hit me. This was the same giant that had smashed through Yuri Orlov's magic shield earlier, while other giants had wandered off. This one stuck around, almost like the big boss or something. A Japanese employee snorted bitterly. "You think this big guy's just standing guard?" "I guess. This is my 3rd time seeing it up close," he said slowly, "and every time I notice something different." "What's it this time?" The man paused for a moment before answering. "It looks to me like it's like it's waiting for someone," he said. The agent nodded slowly, his eyes snapping back to the giant creature. "I see." The agent didn't think that was a bad guess. The Japanese employee had a point. It made sense to think the beast was waiting for something, or someone. As they talked about this powerful magic beast, the helicopter hit the edge of what was safe to fly. A helicopter buzzed overhead, but the giant didn't even move. It acted like the machine wasn't even there. The giant stayed super calm, totally peaceful. But according to the employee, this was all its choice. "The beast will attack anything that gets too close," he said. "No matter if it's a person or a machine, there's no way out." How many times had they tested this? The young man kept talking, and the agent couldn't help but think of Yuri Orlov. The moment the giant monster smashed through the barrier and grabbed Yuri, everyone watching was shocked. His final seconds were broadcast live, across the globe. Yuri Orlov had been described in the Hunter Command Center's report as a man who wanted to become rich and famous. In the end, he didn't get any money from Japan, but he did become infamous worldwide. That might not have been what he was hoping for. As the agent remembered Yuri's last moments, The people from the association began to speak up. Sure, here's a more engaging version of your text. The man's theory about the magic beast waiting for something actually made sense, and the agent was intrigued. Keep going, they said, leaning in with interest. The man continued, encouraged by the agent's curiosity. When I look at this beast, it doesn't really feel alive to me. Sure, it breathes and moves, but it seems more like a programmed machine. A machine? The agent frowned, clearly not sold on the idea. The giant up close was super scary. The heavy feeling in the air wasn't something a machine could create. The giant's eye turned toward them, and the agent went, yikes. Then fatad, she fell out of his chair again. The Japanese representative quickly stepped in to calm him down. Don't worry, he said. It's just looking at us. If we stay back, it won't hurt us. The agent nodded, trying to chill out a bit. His heart felt like it had dropped to his feet. He gripped his camera tightly, trying not to let his shaky hands mess up the shot. The helicopter was moving fast, but that wasn't the only reason the footage was wobbly. When he finally stopped recording, the agent's calm voice broke the tension. How many giants came out of the gate? She asked. 31, he replied, his voice steady despite the fear still buzzing in his chest. All of them except the boss went off in different directions. How many have you killed? Just 2. So that leaves 28 out there wreaking havoc on Japan. There aren't many hunters left to fight them. Everyone else is busy running away. The representative's face turned serious. On the day the dungeon broke open, the hunters who battled the giants gave their lives to give Tokyo's residents time to escape. They managed to take down 2 giants along the way, but 28 were still coming strong, way too many to stop. That's why the Japanese rep decided to team up with the American, even though he had a million other emergencies to handle. What are you doing? The agent tried to stop him, but the Japanese man dropped to his knees and bowed deeply, pressing his forehead to the floor. Pride and dignity didn't matter anymore. He was ready to set them aside if it meant saving his country. The representative begged with tears in his eyes, please help the Japanese people. The American agent stopped in his tracks. Something about the man's words struck a chord. The representative switched to perfect English, his voice shaking with urgency. If America doesn't step in, he said, Japan will be destroyed forever. Japan is a trusted ally of the United States. Please make this sacrifice just this time for Japan. It wasn't clear if the young man's words came from his own heart, or were a message from the Hunters Association of Japan, but the desperation in his voice was real. The agent bit his lower lip, thinking hard for a moment before responding with some difficulty. I'll put in a request, the agent said. The young guy's face lit up, and he bowed over and over, saying thank you many times. The American didn't have the heart to tell him not to get his hopes up too high. Hunter Command had become super strict about keeping their hunters safe after losing so many good agents to Chemish. Would they really take a big risk like this for another country? Probably not. The agent felt terrible. How could he tell this young man, who was trying so hard for his people, that their chances were slim? It seemed cruel to crush his hopes. In the end, all the agent could do was look up at the sky and leave it up to fate. The silence was deafening. Jin-Woo stood there, staring up at the empty sky with a mix of frustration and fear. Heaven help us, he muttered under his breath, like he was pleading for some kind of answer that never came. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo woke up before dawn and went for a jog to clear his head. He knew this routine all too well. As he ran, his eyes were fixed on something just above eye level, screen showing his progress. Deeping. Total distance run, 10 kilometers. You have completed running, 10 kilometers. As he felt a small sense of accomplishment, but deep down he knew nothing had really changed. Even after defeating the so-called architect of this strange system, everything still felt the same. The world was just as silent and still as it had always been. So far, everything had been business as usual. Every morning when Jin-Woo woke up, his daily quests popped up like clockwork, and ever since the black heart took hold in his body, he'd been in top physical shape, stronger, faster, and lighter on his feet than ever before. Even though he was taking things slow, every step felt effortless. But the architect's death had left a lot of questions hanging in the air. What exactly was that file Jin-Woo had seen? It had been one of the conditions to unlock the black heart, but beyond that, it remained a total mystery. Jin-Woo was lost in thought, trying to piece things together, when a loud commotion up ahead snapped him back to reality. Excuse me. Hello. someone called out. Jin-Woo looked up and saw a swarm of reporters gathered outside the guild office building. They had cornered Jinyo as he was heading to work that morning. "Mr. Yu, I'd like to ask you some questions," one of the reporters shouted. Questions poured in one after another. "Mr. Yu, did you hear about what happened with the Hunters Guild?" someone asked. Another voice chimed in. "Can you give us an official statement? You're the vice president of the UT after all." Then came, "How did Hunter Sung end up at that gate? And what does Hunter Sung think about the crisis in Japan? Is he going to help?" Jin-Woo tilted his head slightly. The reporters couldn't talk to him in person, so they ended up following Jinyo instead because he was an easier person to approach. Jin-Woo was just about to step in and help his friend, but something made him stop. "Wait a second." For some reason, Jinyo didn't look upset at all. He had a serious face on, but every now and then, Jin-Woo noticed him hiding a little smile. So Jinyo was actually enjoying this. Jin-Woo couldn't believe it. It was so surprising that he couldn't help but laugh to himself. There was no reason to ruin the party, so Jin-Woo wondered what to do next. Should he quietly pull Jinyo into the office, or let him enjoy himself for now? As Jin-Woo thought about his options, a car pulled up behind him. The window rolled down, and a voice called out, "Are you Hunter Jin-Woo Sung?" Jin-Woo turned around, recognizing the voice. But when he saw who it was, he blinked in surprise. "Oh, it's you," the man said, as he stepped out of the car, confirming Jin-Woo's identity. Jin-Woo knew him too. He was Myung-han Yu from Yujin Construction. A face he'd seen many times on TV, talking about business and economy stuff. "It's awesome to meet you, Hunter Sung," Chairman Yu said with a slight smile and a nod. His greeting was polite but not over the top, showing just the right amount of respect without being too formal. Jin-Woo couldn't help but notice how disciplined and refined Chairman Yu seemed as he greeted him. It wasn't every day that someone as important as the chairman of a big company would treat you with such kindness on your first meeting. Jin-Woo felt surprised by the warm yet respectful way he was being treated, making the encounter even more memorable. Jin-Woo smiled politely. "I'm Jin-Woo Sung. Nice to meet you." Myung-han didn't waste time on small talk. "Sorry to drop by like this," he said, "but could I have a minute of your time?" Jin-Woo wondered why Myung-han had come all the way here instead of sending his son Jinyo. He kept that thought to himself though. Myung-han approached Jin-Woo with a sorry look on his face, like he had no other choice but to come over. "How can I help you?" he asked quietly. "This isn't something we can talk about here." Jin-Woo was wearing a comfy tracksuit with the hood pulled up, trying to stay unnoticed. But Chairman Yu was starting to draw some attention anyway. The place was buzzing with people walking every which way, and Jin-Woo knew it wasn't exactly the best spot for a serious talk. But here he was, trying to figure out why Chairman Yu would want to meet him of all people. Honestly, he had zero idea. If he really had to guess, maybe it had something to do with Jinyo. More and more people started to recognize Chairman Yu, and soon some were even trying to sneak pics of him with their phones. The more attention he got, the more nervous Myung-han became. He knew this was his chance. If he missed it now, it would only get harder to reach Jin-Woo later. Taking a deep breath, he found the courage to push a little harder. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said politely. "But could you please come with me, Mr. Hunter? I promise I won't say anything that might upset you," Jin-Woo said, glancing over his shoulder. He spotted Jinyo soaking up attention from reporters and held back a grin. Jinyo looked distracted. Plus, since he'd been clearing high-level dungeons in the area, with permission from nearby guilds, Jin-Woo thought it was time for a break from raids. He agreed. "Sure thing," Myung-han said with a smile. He opened the passenger door for Jin-Woo like a chauffeur and bowed his head slightly. "Hop in." Jin-Woo slid into the seat, and Myung-han climbed in on the other side. The car was huge, leaving tons of space between them, even though they were both grown men. Before the car even started moving, Jin-Woo asked, "Where are we headed?" Myung-han shrugged. "Nowhere specific. I just thought it'd be fun to drive around and see where the road takes us." Jin-Woo shook his head as the car zoomed off. Myung-han piped up, "I know just the spot. It's super quiet and perfect for chatting." Jin-Woo leaned back in his seat, feeling how comfy it was, just what you'd expect from a fancy ride. The drive was smooth, not a single sound, until they arrived. "Here we go, Hunter Sung," Myung-han said with a grin. The driver hurried to open Myung-han's door, but he waved him off with a smile. The driver walked over and opened Jin-Woo's car door. Jin-Woo stepped out, staring at a super tall building in front of him. "This is where we're gonna talk?"
he asked, sounding unsure.
Right then, about 6 people from Myunghan ran up. They all bowed at the same time, saying, "Welcome Chairman Yo." Jin-Woo was really surprised by how they all bowed perfectly together. Hunter Sung stared in amazement. He wondered how much practice it must have taken for them to move so perfectly together. "Please follow me," Chairman Yu said with a smile, leading him into the building. The sign above the entrance read Yujin Construction in big letters. Inside, Jin-Woo followed, and Chairman Yu walked beside him, matching his pace. "This way," he directed. As they moved through the halls, every employee greeted Myung-han with a friendly hello. He had a serious face, but he nodded to everyone who greeted him. Jin-Woo could tell Chairman Yu was a lot like President Go from the Hunters Association. Someone people really respected. The way the employees looked at him said a lot about his character. Jin-Woo walked quietly behind Myung-han, and soon all the employees were staring. "Who is this guy?" as they seemed to be thinking. "Whoa, is that?"
No way! As he walked into the building, he pulled back his hood, and people instantly recognized him. The room fell silent in shock. This was no ordinary guy. He was Korea's top hunter, and also the country's most amazing entrepreneur. Seeing these two legends walking together through Yujin Construction's halls left everyone stunned. All eyes were glued on them. Some people's mouths dropped open, while others just stood there frozen in disbelief. It was like seeing something you never thought you'd see in your life. Minds were blown. What were they doing here together? The sight was downright shocking.
The female employees couldn't help but stare as he walked by. Some even blushed. The male employees gave him respectful nods. No one really knew why he was with the chairman, but together they looked like two superheroes of business, and everyone admired them as they passed by. Finally, the two men stepped into a fancy executive elevator that was waiting for them at the end of the hallway. It was the perfect escape from all the staring eyes. The elevator doors closed behind Chairman Yu's staff, leaving Jin-Woo and the chairman alone in silence. Following Chairman Yu's lead, Jin-Woo stayed quiet as the elevator zoomed straight up to Myung-han's office floor. Ding. The doors opened, and there was Secretary Kim waiting at the entrance. He gave Jin-Woo a quick nod before bowing respectfully to Chairman Yu. "Sorry for the wait," he said, his voice steady but polite. Chairman Yu's face turned serious when he heard the news. "A guest?" he asked sharply. "Didn't I make it clear that no one should be let in while I was away?" Secretary Kim usually didn't mess up, so Chairman Yu was more curious than annoyed. Secretary Kim looked flustered, like he wasn't sure what to say next. "I told him, sir." He stuttered, but he just wouldn't take no for an answer. Myung-han's eyes lit up as he figured out who the mysterious visitor must be. He shook his head and motioned toward his office. "Nothing to worry about." "This way, please." The door opened, revealing a man who looked about 50 sitting on the couch, flipping through a newspaper to pass the time. He glanced up at them. "Why is it so hard to reach you, my dear elder brother?" he asked. After standing me up today, Soko showed up anyway. His hair was thinning at the front, and he was Chairman Yu's younger brother. He jumped to his feet, excited to see his big brother. But Chairman Yu shot him a stern look. "Didn't I tell you? I have important work to do. I'm busy. Come back later. I know your whole schedule." Soko started to argue, then suddenly stopped talking. His eyes had landed on Jin-Woo.